And it wasn't a plan for you, it was a plan for me. It was a plan for us. And I thank you that that plan included me, and thankful that you have a plan for my eternity. So that's in your son's name. Amen.
On? You hear it then? Okay. All right, let me start again. Good morning. How you guys doing? Well, it's good to have you here. We're in the middle of a sermon series. If it's your first week here, you picked a good week to come, I think, because we're right in the middle of some of the stuff we're talking about. We've been looking at how we try to represent ourselves against how we really are, and the sermon series has been called Not Picture Perfect. I think on Facebook or Instagram or those kind of things, we want to present that everything is together completely, everything is completely polished, everything is completely right. But behind the scenes, we know that it's not. We know there's some things that maybe aren't quite as together as we try to present, and that can be kind of painful to us, and so we wonder what's going on. I got in a conversation a few weeks ago with someone, and they were talking about their relationship with their parents, and they said, I just wish that I had a normal relationship with my mom and dad, and I don't think there is such a thing. I don't think it exists. I don't think there is normal, because I think we're all broken. And so this sermon series, at some level, is about the sin nature that we all deal with. We believe as Christians that there's something in us, some little misfire inside of us that tends to make us choose the wrong thing, given enough opportunity to go the wrong direction. Even though we know what the right thing to do is, we still have one more piece of cake, or we just decide to go a little faster than we should, or we decide to ignore something that we shouldn't. And we know what we ought to do, but then we don't do it. And everybody's like that. And if you don't watch out, sometimes when all that gets together in relationships, it can cause some enormous damage. And we're not nearly as together as we present. And so what we're trying to do is to talk about that, but also talk about, does the Bible give us anything to give us hints about how we could resolve it? And we've been on this for a few weeks, and Gabe took over last week and spoke about this on Mother's Day. And so today I wanted to talk about it. And in particular, today I wanted to talk about how to deal with the black sheep of the family. Now, you may not be the black sheep of the family. This will still be helpful for you, or you may very much be the one who would be the black sheep of the family. If you do feel like you're that person, the black sheep of your family, well, then you're in good company, because Joseph was like that in the Bible. So was Moses. David probably was, and Jesus certainly was. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Sometimes you're the black sheep because you're the only one who's got it figured out. Your whole family's kind of a mess, and you figure some stuff out, and now they're mad at you because you're acting different. So sometimes it can be that. Sometimes it can be more about your family really than about you. They're not accepting, or they're not flexible. They're kind of some dysfunction in there, and so they're taking it out on you, and you can be that person. And nobody likes to be on the receiving end of that. We talked about that, a quote I did a few weeks ago. Bertrand Russell is a famous atheist, but he said a quote that I thought was very good. He said, no one wants to be just patiently endured, right? No one wants, the quote actually was, everyone wants to be accepted. No one wants to be endured with a patient resignation. And no one likes that. And when you're on the receiving end of that, it can be quite painful when you feel like people are just putting up with you because they have to and they'd rather you be somewhere else. And if you are in that situation, I'm sorry. And hopefully there'll be a few things we talk about today that maybe can give you some help. But it may be that you're in that situation and you quite honestly deserve it. You've made a series of kind of bad decisions, and now that's come back, and the family is a little disappointed with you. They wished you hadn't done some of the things you did, and now you wish also that you hadn't done some of the things you did. But it's done, and now every time you get back together for a family get-together, you got to hear about it again, and so you're starting to wonder if it'll ever get better, and will it ever improve, and is there any way I can fix it? And I'm going to talk about that a little bit today, too. I went online just as I had this idea for the series, for the sermon, and I typed in how to deal with it when you're the black sheep of the family. And the first 2 or 3 things that popped up, one of the big advices that they gave was just be yourself, which sounds like a helpful thing, right? Just go be yourself. We tell children that, hey, be yourself. Have some self-esteem. Go be yourself. We've told kids that for since I was a kid. It was when the self-esteem movement started really coming in, and really has been a hallmark of public education and a lot of coaching and a lot of sports, Little League, different things. Hey, be yourself. Just be yourself. Be yourself. Have some self-esteem. How do you think that's working out for us? Do you think our generation is much healthier than previous generations because we have so much self-esteem? Probably not. And I wanted to toss out, just as a possibility, some other advice besides just be yourself. You got be yourself. You can put that in the holster there. But I wanted to kind of give you some advice besides just be yourself, because sometimes, for some people, yourself is the problem. And that's always painful to admit, but sometimes, for some people, yourself is how we got into this hole. So just being yourself won't get us out. So I want to talk about a little bigger advice than just be yourself as we get into it. And I was going to do it by using a guy in the Bible named Jacob. Jacob's story in the Bible, and I think it's a really good story, and I was going to tell it to you today. But I'm only going to tell part of it with the slides and everything. I'm just going to kind of give you some prologue, some advanced stuff about it, and then we'll talk about Jacob here. Jacob was a twin. He and his brother Esau were born at the same time. They weren't identical twins, though. Esau, when he was born, was big and red and hairy from the very beginning. Red hair was very rare in that part of the world, but he was red-headed. Esau means red, or it can mean red, and it can also mean hairy, which was a good name for him because he was both those things. He just came out of the womb, like this. And his brother Jacob wasn't red or hairy. He was a little scrawnier, a little skinnier, and he's holding on to Esau's heel when he comes out. Now, before they were even born, while they were in the womb, God spoke to their mother, to Rebekah, and said, the younger one is going to be more blessed than the older. The younger one's going to rule over the older. The prophecy made, it's actually a section that you could use if you were talking about abortion and what value does a baby have even before it's born. The Bible seems to imply that even before you're born, God has a plan on your life, or he did for Jacob there. And so when they come out, though, Jacob, he's the younger one, and they name him Jacob, which means, could mean just heel, which if that is what they named him for that reason, it would be like they're kind of teasing him from the very moment he's born. Isn't that funny? He's a heel grabber, and they named him heel, and that's what Jacob means. But it can also, because that picture, grabbing the heel, one who trips, or one who supplants, one who schemes. And Jacob kind of lives up to that. While Esau is a stand-up guy, and he's a hunter, and his dad is so proud of him and brags to all the other dads, see that boy Esau, the red hairy one, that's my kid. And he's the one hitting home runs in the Little League games. He's the one quarterback of the football team, and his dad is so proud of him. And then there's Jacob, and his mom likes Jacob, and Jacob kind of is a quiet guy and kind of hangs out behind the tents. In the Marvel movies, if you've seen any of those, the Thor-Loki thing looks a lot like what Esau and Jacob would have been. And the one son is always scheming, trying to get ahead of the golden child who seems like they have everything. And that's how they grew up. And it finally comes to a head because Isaac, their dad, is getting older, and he's afraid he's not going to last much longer. He's lost his eyesight. And so Isaac hits on the idea that I'm going to go ahead and give him my blessing now. Now, Isaac has been told, like I said, even when the boys were in the womb, that the younger one is going to be blessed. But Isaac wants to bless his favorite son. He wants to bless Esau. So he tells Esau, go out and hunt something for me and bring it back, and we'll eat it together, and I'll give you my blessing. And so he goes and does that, and Jacob hears about it, and Jacob's mother hears about it, and so they hit this scheme together that they will try to fool Dad. So they go out and kill a goat, and they cook the goat, and they take the goat skins, and they put the goat skins on Jacob's arms and on his neck, so he'll feel really shaggy and hairy like his brother. Esau's a monster. And so he says, you go in there and hand the thing to your dad, and if he feels you, he'll feel that, and he'll think you're Esau. And he puts on Esau's clothes. And Dad asks him, he says, you sound like Jacob, he says. But then he feels the arms, he feels the neck, and he smells the clothes because Esau's a man. He stinks, and so he smells the clothes. Ah, Esau, he says. And he gives Jacob the blessing, right? Blesses him. And Jacob leaves the room, and Esau comes into the room and says, I'm ready for my blessing. And Dad says, who are you? Well, I'm your son Esau, here for the blessing. And so I just thought you were here. I just gave you the blessing. And they realize that Isaac has went into this old man and lied to him. Jacob's went into this old man, he's lied to him. I mean, here's Isaac at the end of his life, and Jacob's taken advantage. And then he's stolen this thing that Esau's probably waited for years. One day Dad will say this thing over me, won't that be awesome? And Jacob has snuck in there, and Esau is so ticked off, he starts saying out loud where people can hear it, one day soon my dad will be dead, and I'm going to kill Jacob. And he's not saying it like, I'll kill you. It's not like that. It's like, I'm going to kill you. They will never find your body where I'm going to put it, like that. That's how he says it, right? And Jacob hears that. And so he runs for his life. And he's gone for 20 years. For 20 years. He has so messed up his family that he has to just run away for 20 years. He doesn't see them. As far as we know, he doesn't write letters. He doesn't make any contact with them. As far as they know, he's dead. And they move on. We think during that 20-year stretch, his mom died. Jacob never sees her again. Isaac, who they thought was so sick, he keeps hanging on. But if you've ever cared for an aging parent, Isaac may have been in terrible health all that time. And there's Esau caring for it and probably wondering where his brother is as he's taking care of everything. And Jacob, he builds a new life. And God does bless him. God gives him a vision of a stairway to heaven that has been talked about and sang about and painted about. He gives him a vision that I'm going to be with you no matter what. And even though God keeps giving Jacob all these promises, Jacob just keeps ticking people off. He doesn't trust God's way. He keeps stealing and lying and cheating until finally he makes the people he's with. He's moved away. He's hundreds of miles away. But he makes those people so mad they want to kill him. And so he leaves. And he got nowhere else to go but back home. And it's been 20 years. Surely my brother's over it by now. And that's kind of where our story picks up. It says, Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau. And he said, your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban, as a relative. I've been staying with him, and I've remained there until now. I have cattle and donkeys and sheep and goats and male and female servants. So what he's telling him in that first sentence is, I don't want anything. I don't want anything. I'm not coming back to steal your blessing. I'm not coming back to steal your birthright. I'm not coming back to steal your animals. He's writing Esau, so he probably thinks his dad has died too. That dad gave the blessing thinking he was about to die, and Jacob left. He probably thinks that dad is dead. And so I know it's all yours. I know everything dad had went to you. I don't want any of it. That's what that first sentence is about. And the second sentence is about, I just hope bygones can be bygones. He says, now I'm sending this message to my Lord, which is kind of a nice thing to say to somebody, and I'm hoping I can find favor in your eyes. And the messengers returned with word that Esau was on his way to meet Jacob, and he had an army of 400 men with him, and Jacob was frantic with fear. Now, again, if you like those Marvel movies, that Thor-Loki comparison is the thing you ought to have in your mind. Esau is gigantic, and he's tough, and he's strong, and Jacob's none of those things, and Esau's bringing a whole army with him. And so Jacob's assuming the worst, like you would do. And so he does 2 or 3 different things. First of all, he sends a gift to Esau. And I don't put that on the slides, but he sends like hundreds of sheep and cattle and donkeys and camels. He sends all these animals to Esau saying, hey, can't we be friends? One after another, sends all these gifts. And then he prays to God. And he says, oh, God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac. Now, it's interesting. He doesn't say, my God. God, you were good to my grandpa. Abraham, you were good to my dad, Isaac, he says. And you told me that I should go back to my own country and my own relatives and that you'd make me prosper. Well, I'm unworthy of all that kindness and faithfulness you've shown. You know, I had only my staff when I left home, and now I've got 2 camps full of people. So I ask you to save me, God, he prays. I say, I ask you to save me from the hand of my brother Esau, for I'm afraid he's going to come and attack me, and not just me, but the mothers of my children. And you said, I'm going to make you prosper. You've said, I'm going to make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. And so the whole prayer is kind of selfish. Hey, God, you promised you'd take care of me. Hey, God, you promised that you'd carry me through. Hey, God, you promised when I ever got on this. And I'm not even sure I believe in you, God, but you were sure good to my grandpa, and you were sure good to my dad. And so, God, I'm hoping that you'll take care of me here. That's how the prayer goes. It's not the deepest prayer in the whole world. It's not. And the Bible doesn't pretend like it's the deepest prayer in the whole world. He's desperate. He's just whatever he can do to make it right. And he was alone. he actually had sent his family across the river there and his animals across the river. He's all by himself. He's going to meet Esau all by himself. He didn't want anybody else to get hurt if Esau's mad. And a man wrestled with him until daybreak. And when the man saw that he couldn't overpower him, he touches the socket of Jacob's hip, and his hip was wrenched. Just one touch on his leg, and he's crippled in one leg. So it's not really a man that's been wrestling with Jacob. It's been an angel wrestling with Jacob. And the angel could have left whenever he wanted to. All he's got to do is touch Jacob to cripple him. So he's allowing Jacob to hold on, right? Now Jacob's whole pattern, his whole life, is when things get difficult, he runs. When things get difficult, he lies. He schemes. He cheats. But now he's not doing any of those things. He's just hanging on real desperate. And the angel has said, you got to let me go. And Jacob says, I'm not going to let you go unless you bless me. And so he asks him, what's your name? Well, I'm Jacob. I'm the heel grabber. I'm the deceiver. I'm the mess. I'm the black sheep. And the man says, well, that's not your name any longer. He says, now your name's going to be Israel because you've struggled with God and with humans and you've overcome. You've struggled with God. That's what Israel means. You've struggled with God. The nation of Israel, that word means one who struggles with God. And Jacob kind of is the father of modern Israel. He's the father of the Jewish people. I am going to bless you, God says. And I'm going to change your name. And you're no longer going to be this old person. You're going to be this new person. Now, I don't want to dig real deep into this thing, but it's important. You could read this like Jacob won the wrestling match, but he doesn't. He's crippled afterward, at least for some time. I mean, maybe forever, but he's crippled for a little while anyway with this thing, and it's hurt him. It'd be the easiest thing in the world just to let him go because the guy's trying to run away, but Jacob won't let him go. I want you to bless me. And this whole thing's a metaphor, but I think it happened, but it's also a metaphor. It's like, are you going to follow me now, God says? Are you going to hang on to me now? Are you going to trust me now, even when it's painful? Because that's not been Jacob's pattern. Jacob's pattern has never been that way. Jacob's pattern has been when it's hard, I take off. But now he won't. And so God renames him. And this whole thing's a picture of us coming to God. And sometimes it is like wrestling with God. And I don't totally get it, God. You were good to my dad. You were good to my grandpa, but I don't totally understand it. I'm trying to understand it, God. I'm trying to figure it out, and you're just hanging on. And you're just hanging on. And a lot of the things that are going on around you are terrifying and scary, and you're not sure how it's going to work out. And maybe a lot of it's your own fault. You know, for Jacob here, the reason why he's in the spot he's in is because he's made a mess of everything. And maybe that's something you did. I mean, it happens. It happens. Well, what do you do to come back? Well, you do what Jacob did. You pray about it. You say you're sorry, which Jacob sends all these gifts, and he's going to do more than that here in a second. And you hold on to God. And you do what God wants you to do. Jacob looks up, it says, and there was Esau, coming with 400 men. So he himself went on ahead, and he bowed down to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. But Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck, and he kissed him, and they wept. And Esau said, what's the meaning of all these flocks and herds I met? I've already got plenty, brother. You keep what you have for yourself. But Jacob said, no, please. He says, I have found favor in your eyes. Accept this gift, for to see your face is like seeing the face of God. So let's think about that for a second. If you're in the Esau position, you were the one who didn't do anything wrong. The other person did the wrong thing. It's the black sheep who did the wrong thing to you. You've been a good guy all along, and you've got every right in the world to get even. And that's what they're expecting you to do. They're assuming you're going to get even. And in that moment, when you show grace, it's like the face of God, Jacob says. Because God also has us dead to rights, and yet he takes us back. And when we go to God humble, he takes us back. Even though he could certainly be angry about all the different things we've done, he forgives us, and he shows us grace. And when you could do that for somebody else, now again, you don't have to. You don't have to. You absolutely don't have to. Sometimes the right thing to do is say enough. Sometimes the right thing to do is to draw a hard line. Sometimes the right thing to do is to say, we can't be friends any longer. I get all that. I do. But whenever you've got all the right to do that, and instead of doing that, you show grace, you look more like God than you ever will. I just think that's a powerful thing. And Esau here at the end of this thing, he's still the better man. When I first read the story about Jacob as a kid, when I first became a Christian and I came across this story, it just seemed wrong, the whole story, because it seems like Jacob, A, gets away with it, which is hard to read, and then it also seems like Esau is the better guy. I mean, no wonder his dad liked him better. Esau's the guy who's stand up, he's honest. I mean, he's the hardworking. He's been there taking care of dad all these years. Jacob comes back in the scene, and God's going to bless him, and all he's ever done is lied and cheat and steal. And I remember telling somebody when I first kind of got a hold of this in my head, if you could figure out why God would choose a guy like Jacob, the whole Bible would make sense. I think it would unlock everything. If you could figure out what is it about Jacob that God would be interested in, the whole thing makes sense. And I still believe that. And the answer, of course, is there's nothing. He loves Jacob because he loves. Jacob didn't do anything to deserve it. He still gets to sit at the table even though he's the black sheep. And if you can really dig that, if you can really understand that, that's powerful stuff. So taking that story as a foundation, what kinds of things can we learn from it? What should you do if you're the black sheep? Again, first of all, it may not be your fault. Sometimes you're doing the right thing, your family's the mess, and that's why they're treating you like they're treating you. And if that's the case, you've got every right to take care of yourself and set some boundaries. There's a story about Jesus where he does that. It's in Mark chapter 3. His family, Jesus is teaching, and his family comes to get him. He's teaching too much, they say. He's out of his head. And they come to get him, and he's in the middle of this crowd, a church, and he's teaching them, and the family's outside, and they send a guy in to say, Jesus, your mom's outside, your brothers are outside. And he says, well, who is my mother and brothers? And he looks around at the crowd in front of him. So anybody who does the will of God is my mother and brothers. In other words, I'm not going to let them yank me around. And there's a time for you to do that. You're the black sheep, but it's not your fault. It's not your fault. You did the right thing. And Jesus there in Mark chapter 3, there's a time to say, I'm going to be about the things I'm going to be about. Not be mean, but I'm going to be about the things I'm going to be about. Now, interestingly enough, Paul talks about after the resurrection that Jesus appeared to certain people. And one of the people that he appeared to was James. Went to James, his brother, the same brother who had come to get him thinking he was nuts. He went to James personally after the resurrection to let him know that I'm back. And he shows him grace. He shows him the face of God. Even though Jesus could have just wrote James off the rest of his life, he doesn't do it. He could have wrote his mother off the rest of her life because of what she did. But he doesn't do that either. When he's on the cross, he tells one of his disciples, this is your mother. You take care of her when I'm gone. He doesn't write people off. He still loves them even though he's got every right in the world to walk away. He sets up some appropriate boundaries, but he's still open. And that really is our guide, right? That really is our guide. So if you're the black sheep and it's not really your fault, then you can follow Christ's example. Set up some appropriate boundaries. Invest deeply in the relationships that are around you that are healthy, that are going the right direction. But I mean, you still show grace. You still show compassion. You still show kindness. But occasionally, you're the black sheep, and it is very much your fault. You were the one who did the stupid thing. You were the one who was exposed. You were the one who was caught. You were the one who lied or cheated or stole or ran off. You were the one who took advantage. And the reason why everybody's mad at you, if you'd have a moment of just transparency and honesty with yourself, is because of you. And so in that situation, getting back to the very first thing I said there in the sermon, be yourself is bad advice, right? If it's you that did all this thing, just go be yourself may not be the very best advice. And it's hard to hear, right? It's hard to hear that because we want to trust our gut. We want to trust our own instinct. But sin, and when it gets a hold of you, and when your sin gets a hold of you, one of the qualities of sin is that you're blind to it. You just don't see it. I've talked about this before, but it's absolutely true. If you're on a car ride with three other people, and you're going some hundreds of miles together in the car together, and one of you is talking way too much, who's the only person in the car who doesn't know who that is? Well, the one who's talking, right? Or if you're on the same trip, and one of you is obviously stingy, they're never jumping in to help pay for anything, who's the only person who's unaware there's a stingy person in the group? Well, the stingy person. They're the only one who doesn't know. They think they're just part of the crowd. You just don't see it. It's like when you listen to your voice on a recording. Well, I don't sound like that. Or they take a picture and you say, well, I don't look like that. And all your friends are like, well, that's how you look, man. But they don't, you're kind of, let's take another picture. I can do it better. So you take another picture. No. That's not how I look. But it is how you look. That's exactly how you look. Most of the time, eyes closed like that. That's how you look. And we can't do anything about it. We've all learned to live with it. You need to. But you can't. Because in your head, I don't look like that. I don't sound like that. I don't do those sorts of things. Right? You just don't see yourself. One of the qualities of sin is that we don't see who we are. Not 100%. And even when we do see who we are a little bit, we excuse it. I've seen this dozens of times through the years. If you're talking to a married couple that's having trouble, well, what's the problem? Well, he'll say, well, the problem is she nags too much. And she'll say, well, no, that's not the problem. I only nag because he never does anything. Which is weird. Because like if someone walked up to you on the street and said, I bet you nag too much, you'd say, do not, right? You would. But you can't say that in front of your husband because he knows that you do. And if somebody came to your street and said, but you do nothing, you'd say, I do too. I do stuff all the time. But he can't say that either because he knows it's the truth. He knows he doesn't do that much. He knows that the things that she's saying about him is exactly right. So he'll have to say, well, I only do what I do because you're always bossing me around. Well, I'm only bossing you around because you drink too much. Well, I only drink too much because you're just like your mother. And then the conversation really takes off in a brave new direction, right? But it's always another reason. I only do what I do because of what you do. And you don't see that it's not like that. You don't see your sin. You don't see it. So for a person who's like that, and we're all like that, the advice, hey, just be yourself. That's not great advice. And I hear Christians sometimes give one another that advice. You know, somebody's, well, I've just had it with my wife, I'm going to leave her for this younger woman, or I've just had it with my husband, I'm going to leave him for, finally get some peace of mind, or I just had it with my kids, enough's enough, or I just had it with my parents, I'm going to write them off. And they'll go talk about it to their friends, and Christian friends will say, you're doing the right thing. Whatever you want to do, that's right. And that's crazy. I mean, it's just crazy. It's doing what we want to do that got us into this problem. So what's the answer? What did Jacob find out? Well, you hang on tight to God. You just hang on tight to God. You just don't let go. I mean, and it may be painful, but you just don't let go. Jacob's first thing he did is pray about it. And if you find yourself the black sheep and it's a lot your fault that you're the black sheep, that should be your first step too. Well, I'm not much of a prayer. Well, Jacob wasn't much of a prayer. That's okay. God help me, I don't even know what I'm doing. That's a fine prayer. God have mercy on me, I'm a sinner. That's a great place to start. And you start there. And then once you do that, you hang on to God. You get yourself around good Christian people and you invest. And as you invest in them and you begin to trust them a little more, you start to listen to what they have to say. You try to listen to what God might be saying through others, what God might be saying through His Word. Remember your calling. Gabe and I did a video this week, and we were talking about how God knows you even before you're born. And a lot of that comes from a verse in Psalm chapter 139. He says, David does, you created my inmost being, and you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. I wanted to think about that part. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. God has a plan for your life. It's all in His head ahead of time. He's got things He wants to do with you. And He knows it. And sometimes you can sense it. That this is a big choice I'm making here. That I need to be very careful what I do next because God is directing me here. And it's like a script. And God says, well, this is your line. And you say, no, I'm not going to say that, God. I'm going to go off script. I'm going to go this other direction. And so you did that. And maybe you did that several times, and now you and God aren't on the same page at all. All the days ordained for me were written down, but I've kind of went a different direction. And so one of the steps is to remember who you are, that God chose you before you were born to be His. I have a friend in Tennessee whose parents told him repeatedly when he was growing up, we never planned to have you. That does wonders for your self-esteem if you get told that over and over again. And you may have been a surprise to your parents, but you were not a surprise to God. And God had a plan for your life. And God had things that He wanted you to do. And there's certain things that only you can do. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. There's certain gifts and talents and abilities that He put into you He didn't put into anybody else. And when you tie yourself to Him and you allow His Spirit to come into you and He are on the same page, you're meant for great things. There's a story in the Old Testament of Abraham who is Jacob's grandfather, and he looks up at the sky and he sees all the stars. And God says to Abraham, Jacob's grandfather, He says, look at all those stars. That's who your descendants will be. And one of those descendants will bless the whole world. And one of those descendants was Jesus. And now we've been grafted into that. And so when Abraham was looking at that sky of stars, one of those stars had been lit up for you. That's who you are. That the God who made this world had you in mind before you ever came along. And somehow you've gotten off script. So come back to God. The good news with God is you always can. Now with a guy like Esau, or somebody like who you may have disappointed, it may be too late. They may not be open to change. That happens. It's sad, but it happens. But God will always take you back. All you've got to do is ask. And then second, it's okay to lose. One of the things about the be yourself advice is it assumes that you go get them, you'll do the right thing because you're so smart, you're so cool, you're so together. And but the Bible seems to go a different direction. Jesus says the one who loses their life for me will find it, will save it in the end. And you're called to lose sometimes. And don't be scared of that. Jacob lost when he held on to that angel and he was hurt. He lost when he bows down in front of his brother, not knowing for sure where it's going to go. And it could have went south. It turned out good, but it doesn't have to turn out good. He lost when he finally agreed, God, I'm going to do it your way from now on. But that's where you want to be. The thing about losing to God is making a decision that I'm going to open my whole life to Him. A husband and a wife are arguing, and in the middle of the argument, the husband or the wife says to the other, I don't ever want to talk about this again. And what they mean when they say that is, I'm not going to grow anymore on this issue. I'm sick of hearing you talk about it. And Jacob had lived his whole life like that. When he finally learns to lose and allow God to get into even the dark corners, that's when he's really alive. And that's when he really changes. And that's when he really becomes who he was supposed to be. So how do you get started if you're a black sheep? First, pray. Always good to start with prayer. Ask God to move. Ask God to teach. Ask God to help. Ask God to show. And He will. Second, get yourself better connected to other good Christians. Get yourself connected to some people who can help you figure some things out, even if it's just getting together for supper a couple nights. You know, I'll cook, I'll get the grill going, let's get together and let's talk, and start building some relationships with some people who you know have a few things figured out. And gradually, as you trust them, start to open your life up to them. Get some other eyes on your life. Get some people who you respect to take a look at some of the things that are going on. And hold on tight to God. I'll have the band come back up. We've been having a conversation, my family and I. My mom and dad have written some stuff down, some memories of their childhood, and a lot of the things they wrote down I didn't know or didn't have any idea about. They mentioned, both my parents, that they had to use an outhouse when they were kids. That was what their house had. And I thought outhouses went away around George Washington's time. I didn't know outhouses. I didn't know they hung in quite as long as they did. And so I really felt like I didn't understand, like I'm a lot younger than I thought. And then they brought up party lines, and I remember party lines, and my kids looked at me like, what's a party line? Is that like a funner phone line that you could get on? And no, it's not like that at all. And It's about you talking while the old lady down the road is listening to every word you're saying. It's what a party line's like. And then I felt old again. When I was a kid, our TV, we thought it was a great TV. We had 3 channels, and you had to get the horizontal and the vertical adjustments just right, or the screen would keep looping through, and you'd have these black lines. Even when you had a good picture, you couldn't really see it. I mean, sometimes I remember watching football games with my dad or with a bunch of people, and like the football, you can see the quarterback's arm go, but you really can't see where the ball's at. You hope that they catch it. You can't see anything. And we thought it was great. And when we got married, we had a much better TV, but it was real small. It was like 19 inches, and I didn't have a big TV for a long time. And a few years ago, I finally got a big screen TV. I was so proud. One of my friends said, "Now you're finally a man." And I felt like it. I felt like I had finally moved into manhood. And it's HD, and you can see the ball. You can see the ball, right? And you can see all of it. Now, when we were kids, we didn't know it was bad. It's what we thought everything was. We had no idea that it was better. We just thought that's what it was. We thought we had a great television. We didn't know it was any different. It's only when you see the better thing that you realize what you didn't have. And what Christ is offering you is life in HD. What he's offering you is a chance to really live. Instead of always taking care of yourself and always guarding yourself and always protecting yourself and always taking the safe route for you, always just surviving, always managing everything, he's offering you a chance to really be free. And I know sometimes it's hard to imagine what that would even be like. And it seems painful. Well, I'd have to give in, or I'd have to lose, or I'd have to serve, or I'd have to, and it just seems like too much. Because you think that what you've got is as good as anything, and it's only because you've not seen the other thing. And that's what I'm praying for you today. That you'll reach out and take Christ's offer, that you'll ask God to move in your heart, and you can have the life that's really life. Won't you stand up? I'm going to pray with you. Let's pray together. Dear Lord God, I thank you for this group, and I do pray for them, God. I ask you to help any one of them who needs to draw close to you to have the courage to take that step. And I pray, God, that you open doors. If there's somebody here and they know they've got to do some business this afternoon to fix some things, and I pray you give them the courage to do it. It's easy to get inspired in a church service and lose that before you leave. I pray, Father, that you continue to draw us back close to you. In Jesus' name, amen.